Hi everyone, Lynn here, and today I'm sharing a mixed media cup with you. Now I started off with an old leather belt. You could use faux leather, it really doesn't matter. Make sure that you measure your wrist size and you want to add at least 2 to 4 inches to that measurement and then cut your belt at that point. I am using my Tim Holtz scissors and they do work, but you'll see me using a regular like X-Acto knife later on because that's much easier to cut the belt with. I'm going to make an angled cut. So I'm just measuring about 1.5 inches in from one end, and I'm going to cut at a very slight angle, and you can see with the X-Acto knife. So I am using the X-Acto knife here. This is much easier than trying to cut it with scissors, even the Tim Holtz scissors, which are excellent. So I do have to make a number of passes, and I still wind up using the scissors for just a little bit. With leather being the kind of fabric that it is, you do need to sand the rough edges. You will have rough edges, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm using an emery board to do that. And I'm going to do just the sides that I have cut. The rest of the piece is actually finished because it was a finished belt. Now I'm going to use my quarter chomper to round the edges of just the areas that I cut. And again, I'm going to go ahead and use an emery board to just file away the rough spots. The next step is to go ahead and punch some holes. I'm actually using a heavy duty hole punch, and I'm punching one hole and then slightly overlapping and punching again so that I have basically an oval shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the smallest punch on my Crocodile Big Bite to punch a hole at the opposite end, about an inch in. So this is where I realized that I needed a second set of holes. My wrists are pretty small, and I generally do make a second set of holes anyway, so I'm just repeating the process that I've already done before by making an oval shape with my punch. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue in my closure, which I'm using a Tim Holtz hitch fastener to do that with. So I've already put a little bit of glue on the screw part, and now I'm going to put the hitch part on. And you can see I'm having a bit of a trouble getting it started, but once I've got it started, I can go ahead and screw it in. Just make sure that you screw it in as far as you can go, and even though I have a pretty thick belt, the glossy accents is holding it. Now it's time to go ahead and start the painting. Now I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do this, so I started off with putting 2 coats of metallic paint on the leather, and I am using Jacquard Lumiere paints, but any metallic paints will work for this process. This particular color is called Halo Blue Gold. Now I did forget to turn on the camera for the first set of stenciling that I did, but I used again the Jacquard Lumiere paint in Sunset Gold. Now I'm going to go ahead, using the same stencil, I'm going to go ahead and just move the stencil over and use a Halo Violet Gold paint over top. I'm going to go ahead in this manner one more time. All I'm doing every time is just moving the stencil over so that I'm not stenciling the exact same shape over top of what I've already done. So this way I'm getting definition of color and texture through color because I'm using more than one color with the same stencil. At this point I'm going to go ahead and pull out the Pearl Magenta, and again I'm going to go over top and add more stenciling. I should probably mention at this point that you do want to make sure that you don't have too much paint on your sponge while you're pouncing up and down, because the paint will run under the stencil, and that did happen to me with the Sunset Gold. Now I'm using a different stencil from Tim Holtz and the Pearl Turquoise paint, and just adding some highlights here and there on the cuff. Now that I have the paint on, it's time to finish the edges. And I actually had already done this prior to painting, but I went ahead and did it again just to make sure I covered any extra paint bits on the sides. As long as you use an archival ink, whether it stays on or Ranger Archival, it really doesn't matter, but it does need to be a permanent ink, and just run it over the edges. This is where I decided that since I was doing kind of like an art journal mixed media background for my cuff, that I needed to add some black just to make the whole bracelet pop. So I'm actually using black gesso. The brand is Bob Ross, but it really doesn't matter. If you don't have any black gesso, black paint will do that. I would probably want to use a matte finish, but it really doesn't matter either way. Now that the background for my cuff is finished, it's time to go ahead and embellish. And in order to do that, I need to find the center point. So I've placed the cuff around my wrist with the hitch fastener at the bottom, and now I'm just eyeballing where the center point would be and marking it so that I know I can work outwards from that point on either side. It's now time to go ahead and embellish, and I'm using Prima Magnolia trim as the base for my embellishments. I have two pieces that I've cut, and I'm going to go ahead and glue them down in the center, overlapping slightly. Now with something flexible like fabric, it's not that big a deal if you glue the whole piece down. Where you will run into a problem is if you're trying to glue down something stiff like the rustic washer Prima mechanical that I'm adding right now. Just make sure you only add glue to the center, because you are gluing to a cylinder. I'm now going to go ahead and start adding my flowers. I am using Petaloo Velvet Flowers. These are the lilies, and I've taken one full stem and just cut it in half and gluing one to either side. The color is called Lavender Purple. And then the teal flowers that you're looking at right now, those are also velvet flowers, and they are pansies, and the color is teal. Here I decided that I wanted to add a few more washers, and also realized that I needed to add some more teal to the sides. Now you see me open the bracelet, and I'm going to go ahead and continue on gluing on either side. But I'm going to run into a problem, and I think you'll see that. I just snipped off a flower there. I'm going to just change its position. So I am just playing around with placement at this point. I am adding a washer underneath the lilies on that side, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And once I have those in place, I'm going to go ahead and add more of the pansies. Here I'm taking apart one of the pansies, and you can see that I'm left with a full blossom, and then the other piece is just two petals to that blossom. I'm going to use that as well as another one to tuck in to my flower. I'm just fighting with the glue at this point. Once I have it going, then I'll go ahead and add my blossom underneath the lilies. And then I'm going to actually move those two petaled blooms around until I like the placement. I'll be moving a few different times until I'm finally satisfied with their placement, and I'll go ahead and glue them down. Once I was done, I went ahead and closed up the cuff, and this is where I realized that not only was my rustic washer in the wrong place, so was the flower. You could actually from the side see a huge gap in between my flowers. And so I went ahead and moved the washer and took the flower off and then glued it back in place just slightly closer to the lily. And there you have it. There is my mixed media cuff all finished with the beautiful velvet flowers and that gorgeous journal type background. Hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching.